Thanks, Kip. As we move into the next part, again, I want to invite you, if you haven't already done so or came in after we mentioned this, to grab a piece of paper and something to write with. We're going to do, you'll have an opportunity to do a little doodling and writing, nothing very long during the sermon time. For now, we're going to move into our celebration of all the saints. And the way we're going to do this in this virtual space together, normally we come together in a circle and we light candles and we raise up names and we do a litany together. And this space is a little bit different. So I have extended an invitation over the past couple weeks for people to send me photographs and names of people who are connected to them in some way, who have died, that we want to remember and honor. So Terry is going to share a video just now, which will include those names. It will also include a medley that Kyoko has recorded for us, and the names of just some people in the world that are wise ones, that have offered their gifts to the world or that have died by violence in the past year. There will also be a time during the sermon when you're invited to add the names of other people in your life or the world that are important to you that you would like us to raise up. So at this point, I invite us to remember some of those saints. Amen. Our text this morning from the Bible comes from the book of Hebrews, the 12th chapter and the first 3 verses. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. 30 years ago, my friend Patrick invited me to his home. He was a student at the Black Ecumenical Seminary in South Africa, where I was living at the time. We drove, along with my partner in our small, beat up, faded yellow Toyota, from the eastern central part of the country to the farthest corner of the northeast to a region called Gazankulu, which was right below the country of Mozambique. We drove for about 10 hours or so on interstates and main roads, turned onto smaller auxiliary roads, then onto dirt roads, and then the road appeared to just end. To our right and to our left was high, razor-sharp, dry grass. There was absolutely no road in front of us. But before us was a dried-up riverbed. It looks like we've taken a wrong turn, I said to Patrick. Oh no, this is right, he said. Just keep going. Keep going? I'm sorry, but there's no way we can make it across. This is the way, he said. It looks impossible, but just keep going. Everything inside me said this wouldn't work. We had an old car, we didn't have money for repairs, and there was no garage around us. But he was taking us to his home. This was his part of the country, and we were his guests. I prayed and put the car in first gear. Suffice it to say, it was not easy. The car kept bottoming out, scraping on the rocks. I was sure we would lose the whole transmission. At one point, he and my partner had to get out of the car to lighten the load, and we were able to make some progress. Eventually, we made it down the steep embankment, across the rocks, around the boulders, and then up the embankment on the other side. And then eventually we came to his home. Patrick's mother was one of 4 wives to his father. They all lived together in community. There were many children, Patrick being the eldest. The children ran to greet us. We were brought from mother to mother to mother to mother, and then to the father, and then to the grandmother. The structures there were all made of mud bricks with thatched grass roofs. Some of them were round, some were square, most were just one room. We were taken to a low structure with a small fire burning on the mud floor in the center. There was a hole in the thatched roof that allowed the smoke to escape. We had to crouch way down to enter, and we sat on the ground. The smoke and the darkness made it hard to see, but eventually we noticed a woman lying across the floor, wrapped in a blanket, and she looked ancient. She spoke to us, and her grandson translated. Among other things, she spoke of the ancestors. And when she was done, Patrick asked if we had any questions for her. We did. Where are the ancestors exactly? We asked. She took her arm from out beneath the blankets and she waved it above her head and then waved it in front of her. When I do this, she said, the ancestors are here. When I do this, they are here. Walter Wallace Jr., his family called him Little Walt. He was 27 years old. He was due to be married and had a baby on the way. And last week, like so many of us, or our children, or our loved ones, he had an emotional crisis. Something was too much, too traumatic, or too scary, or too out of kilter. And instead of getting the help he needed, his mama stood next to him on the street on Locust between 61st and 62nd as the police approached, and she watched him die. I invite you to join me, and with Patrick's grandmother, now an ancestor herself, and just do this. Remember Walter Wallace Jr., Little Walt. I invite you to close your eyes and wave your hand in front of you. When we do this, he is here. I invite you to keep your eyes closed And as I read these names, wave your hand and see if you can imagine the lives of those who have gone before us. Karen's mom, Joan, you just saw her picture. Molly's grandmother, Willie Mae. Our beautiful sister, Remy Fells. 1.19 million people on this earth that have died from the coronavirus. 12 siblings in Philadelphia this week alone who were shot and killed by gun violence. When we do this, they are here in this cloud, this great cloud of witnesses, as the Hebrews text puts it. We are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. And now I invite you to think of someone that you have loved who has died, someone who means something to you, someone you feel close to, or someone you don't know but would like to feel close to. If you have paper and something to write with, I invite you to draw a big cloud. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be worried about what it looks like. Just draw a big cloud. And I invite you to write a name or names of someone who has died that feels important to you, whether you're related to them biologically or even knew them personally. So this is my cloud, just a very rough cloud. And in my cloud this morning, I wrote the names of some of the people who have been part of my life and some of the people who I don't know and never knew and would never have known me even if we lived at the same time, but who I feel close to and would like to be close to in this time. So I invite you to take a minute, draw a cloud, think about a name or the names of someone who's died that's important to you. And as you do that, or if you are not writing things down on a piece of paper, I invite you to put those names in the chat box. I invite you to, in the chat box, list the name or names of people who are important to you who have died, ancestors that you would like to claim for yourself. And I'll give you just a little bit of time to think about that. Write it on your paper, in your cloud, and also put it in the chat. As you continue to write or draw, I'm going to speak these names aloud, and I invite you to hold them in your own spirit, in your own space. And if you're so moved, wave your hand in front and see if you can feel their presence and honor their lives. Elandria Williams, Molly Ion, Jean Kaiser, Elandria Williams, Sylvia Rivera, Ken Roberts, Philip Mesner, Anita Petrucci, Don Anderson, Vivian Collingsworth Wiesner, Al Quinones, Myra Ramos, Jenny Ramos, Russell Fries, Juniper's grandmom, Regina, Linda Jackson, Matilda Corbin, Sophia's grandmother, Helen Iverson, Bill Stroud, Cecilia Allman, Miguel Allman, Jenny Ramos, Vicky Ramos, Carmen Ana Ramos, Irma Ramos, Blake Brockington, John Prine, Ethel and Howard Scott, Charles and Rose Miller, Rachel Trandall, Allison, Beth, Julie, McCoy Tyner, Baby Spirit and Baby Jamie, Gloria Gibson Hamilton, Marjorie Benson Gibson, Irma Benson, John Hamilton, Klaus Brown, Baby Ruth, Maxwell and J.W. Bigham, Laverne Tremblay, Josh Lieberman, Antonietta Gutierrez, Celita Becile, Mary and Jim Anderson, Nellie Anderson, Manuel Gutierrez, Cecilia Gutierrez, Phil Townsend, Murray Miller, my mom and dad, Bob and Helen, Luis A. Dupre III, Allison Mincer, Marjorie and Alfred O'Neill, Gloria Cesares, Jackie Adams, Monica, Charlene, Carol Rainville, Bert and Anna Rickenbach, Loretta Aileen Carlson Warren, Sarah Sharp, Robert Sharp, Joseph Sanchez, RBG, Aidan Seddon, Joyce Cheeseman, Judy Van Dyne, Ruth Ricker, George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, Ahmed Arbery, Nelson Mandela, Dorothy Height, Tony McDade, and Mia Green. I invite you to keep this cloud with you this week. Take this on this paper you've written, or if you haven't written it now, do it when church is over. Add names to this cloud, names of your people. Think about people in your life and in the world that you would like to accompany you in these next remarkable days. Think about your own ancestors. Think about not just the big personalities in your family lineage, but think about the people that are often forgotten, the people who are different from you, whether they're in your family or even in someone else's. And consider adopting an ancestor, adding to your cloud a name that maybe struck you today in some way. Maybe it's Leslie's mom, Miss Gloria, or Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or Kathy's beautiful daughter, Allison, or little Walt. I invite you to keep this cloud of witnesses with you this week and add to them. Pray with them around you. Invite them to accompany you, to strengthen you, to give you courage. Therefore, Hebrews says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. These are our ancestors, these saints, these names that we lifted up, the ones who have gone before us, the ones who gather around us in this cloud of witnesses above and around us, at our backs and having our backs, leading us on, bolstering us up, dreaming into our dreams and stirring up our prayers. They urge us, this is the way. It looks impossible, but just keep going. And so for many of us now, it does seem hard. It seems sometimes impossible, as if the road has ended and we can't see how we'll make it across. And we may feel so vulnerable in old, familiar ways, and vulnerable in ways we've never experienced. So afraid, frightened for the safety of those we love, and afraid for our own safety and security. So angry, and just so damn sad. We carry all this in our bodies, these bodies with their fleshy parts and bony parts, with their lumpy parts and broken parts, their stretch marks and wrinkles and scars, our hearts pumping, 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 our brains doing their weird and wild and amazing brainy things. I invite you, wherever you are, to take a deep breath, to breathe in what the trees breathe out, and breathe out what the trees breathe in. Breathe in, knowing that we're breathing the same particles that Jesus breathed, that Gandhi breathed, that Fannie Lou Hamer breathed, that our ancestors breathed. And breathe out. That same breath will be breathed by the children of the children of the children who are yet to come. And feel your feet. Imagine they're sending down roots through the floor into the earth, connecting you with the life beneath. That's the heartbeat of our planet. And look at your hands. Wherever you are, look at your hands and notice what they're doing right now. Appreciate all that they hold and all they do. And right now I want to invite Nell Anderson, who has become part of our circle over the last few months, to share a reflection about her experience of loss and presence. And as she does, I invite you to pay particular attention to the notion of hands.
Oh. Hi, everybody. Along the lines of things we're learning, I've been taking a writing class, a memoir writing class, and I happened to share this with Linda last night. And I think she was already thinking about hands. So this seemed to connect. So my piece is called, How Do Our Loved Ones Continue to Be Present in Our Lives After Death? I never expected to be living alone in this house on West Penn Street in Philadelphia for the last 3 years. It's the beginning of the fall in 2020, and though the trees are hardly showing autumn color, the air has just started feeling cool at night. It was this time of year when Manuel and I purchased this house and moved in. The week before we were married in 1982. It is where our daughter was conceived and grew up, and where my stepsons came for every Thanksgiving, Easter, and summer vacations until they were in college. It is where our friends gathered for dinners, conversation, Halloween parties, and Noche Buena. It is also where Manuel died, and where I grieve, and where I'm learning to live without him. Tonight, during a pre-writing class meditation on place, I remember all of those moments in this house. And I notice that my hands are folded and that the top hand is comforting the one underneath. When Manuel died suddenly of a heart attack 3 years ago, and the medics had finished their efforts to bring him back, I sat with his body and held one of his hands in mine. Though I'm not religious and don't have any beliefs in a heaven that will reunite us, I have experienced the continued spiritual presence of my mother years after her death. In my last moments with Manuel's body, I hoped he would stay with me in some way as well. I spoke aloud to him. I said, Manuel, I hope you're going to be one of the dead people that stays in touch. I held his hand for a long time, perhaps hours, and even took a picture of our hands together, a picture that is still on my phone. In retrospect, I think he took this as his marching orders. However, I didn't realize how specific my request had been. After his body was taken away, after he was cremated, and his ashes spread by the red-covered bridge in the Wissahickon, I kept looking for him in my dreams, in the house, somehow looking for a conversation. But he wasn't in my dreams, nor in his favorite chair, nor was he in the kitchen with me, cooking black beans Cuban style. nor emptying the dishwasher in the morning, a task that for some reason he owned. I was so jealous of my widow friends that told me how they had long conversations with their dead partners. It took me a long time for me to realize that my partner shows up by holding my hand, whereas my mother shows up unexpectedly outdoors when I'm in a place of great beauty. Manuel returns to me during the times when my heart and mind are still, as in our writing class meditation. The first time I realized this was on a day my granddaughter Jane was at the house. She was playing with the dollhouse and singing. I was at the dining room table just enjoying her activity and relaxing rather than trying to get work done or clean up the room. And then out of the blue, I realized he was holding my hand. It felt the way a weighted blanket on a person's body, grounded, comforting, settling, and safe. Aha, Manuel always yearned for me to stop running around so much and just be still. Funny how he's still coaxing me along with this. I love that about him.
Nell, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing despite the vulnerability and maybe even a little bit of trepidation. And I hope you can feel us all holding you with gratitude, and you might even see some appreciation in the chat box. Did you notice what was happening with Nell in her hands in that sharing? How the way her hands were folded one on top of the other as a gesture of one hand comforting the other. I invite you to notice what it would be like to have that experience with your own hands and which way it feels comfortable, which hand is the comforter and which is the receiver, and how a simple gesture like that can help us ground and settle and connect and be comforted. In these next days, I invite us to think not just about that cloud, but also the ground, the cloud and the ground. So, in addition to holding on to those ancestors that we are inviting to accompany us in these days ahead, I invite you also to think about what thing or things you can do that are simple, that are gestures, that are words, a photograph, humming a song, repeating an affirmation, drawing a picture, putting your feet on the ground, or resting one hand on top of the other, that will ground you during this time, that will help you feel connected to yourself, to others, to the earth, and to God. I invite you as we move into this week to hold the cloud and the ground. So my picture this morning just looks like this: a cloud with names, and the ground, things that help me feel grounded. Folding my hands, messaging my friend, taking deep breaths. Rabbi Arthur Waskow talks about the connection between breath and God. He reminds us that in the ancient biblical texts, the name for Holy One, for God, never had vowels. So it was not really the name Yahweh or Jehovah. The vowels were added later. So if one were to try to pronounce these ancient names for God, what would come out simply is breath. The name in the ancient texts for God is Yah or its brilliance, Rabbi Arthur writes, its brilliance as a name of God that it alone, breathing alone, is spoken in every human tongue. All the myriad names of God have breath as their root and nurture. And not only human languages, but also every grass and tree and frog and leopard, the interbreathing of oxygen and CO2 between animals and vegetation is what keeps Earth alive. God is breath. The breath of our ancestors, the breath of the Amazon rainforest, the very lungs of our planet, the breath of my red, shaggy Irish doodle Maggie, the breath of little Walt's mama, the breath that Marissa took before the judge declared what God and we already knew, that she is truly Nevaeh's and Adrian's and Elena's and Josiah's mama. The breath we take or took before we fill out or filled out our ballots, press that button, and ready ourselves for what's next. The cloud and the ground. Paul Tillich, a great 20th century theologian, called God the ground of our being. So this week, if you need to lament, lament. If you need to wail, wail. If you need to weep, weep. If you need to laugh, laugh, a good deep belly laugh. If you need to walk, walk. If you need to rage, rage. If you need to rock, then just rock and rock. If you need to dance, then by golly, turn up that music and dance it out. If you haven't voted, then by God, vote. All these are ways to pray. All these are held by God, the cloud of witnesses, the ground of our being, the breath of our future. Don't give up. You have a whole cloud of witnesses swirling around you, ready to be called into service, ready to accompany you, ready to help you run the race with perseverance and not grow weary and lose heart. Carry your cloud with you and remember the ground. Pick something and do it each day when the temperature rises or fear sets in or you find yourself feeling disconnected from yourself or others, the earth or God. The Reverend William Barber has said, hope goes through despair, not around it. I guess he's been on that same road to Gazankulu that I have. When you come to the end of the road and face that dry, seemingly impassable rocky riverbed, remember what Patrick said. This is the way. It looks impossible, but just keep going. This is God's good news. Amen.